Hi there, welcome to my continuing adventures playing the game Elite Dangerous. Now we are at Horizons 2.0 and here we'll find a few playing tips which I will share along the way and a few ways to save time. One of those is the fast way to leave a planet's surface. All we have to do is to plot a course outside of the planet's surface, but somewhere in our view from the cockpit, and then all we need to do is to aim for that target and break out of the Earth's atmosphere. The planet's atmosphere will disappear in the right hand column as soon as we are not mass locked anymore, and then we can press the toggle hyperspace key, not the frameshift drive key or the hyperspace key itself, but the toggle key, and that will actually aim us straight towards that spot and we will go into hyperspace. Certainly save a lot of time trying to exit that planet's surface and moving out into supercruise the long and slow way. That means you can get straight on to the next target that you've plotted in the route planner, and it saves all that time. So now we can aim for the next one, and now let's skip on to the next clip, and in the next clip we will be trying to land on a planet. So let's find the fast way, and I apologise for the screen jerking a little bit because these frame rates are actually dependent on my ripper, which I was actually playing with the settings during this rip. So as you can see, this planet is very, well, not very cratered but very canyoned, with lots of canyons there, and all you have to do is to approach that planet and press the usual 75% key when you get 7 seconds towards that thing, and then when you get near the blue area, the blue outer ring, you press the 50% key and then you line it up with your destination. That will then eventually go into the glide mode after you've got around the atmosphere, and then if we aim just above our destination, that should give us the optimum flight path all the way down there, and we can glide most of the way down there, all the way down to maybe 4 kilometers from that spot. So if we aim to overshoot the back of that thing slightly, it means the glide will drop out. So we're near that target and saves all that time boosting all the way there. In this case we have found the station on the planet and we've got within 4 kilometers of that thing, which means we can simply now radio in for communication to land. And now, because we are in the Anaconda now, having upgraded to one of the biggest ships in the game up to a few weeks ago, now I have upgraded on Christmas Day. I have also fitted the automatic docking computer, and for an Anaconda that thing is absolutely critical to get, not for any other ship, the smaller ships in the game. Maybe for the 2 larger ships it is, but definitely for the Anaconda you can't actually get anywhere near that landing pad because of the huge nose, and we can't tell where we are either. So I definitely recommend the landing computer, the docking computer that is, for the Anaconda. So let's just check out the exterior view, and we can see that this is a Blade Runner type complex on the surface of a barren moon, and it's novel to see this for the first time, and it's novel to sit back in our back seat of this thing and remotely control the landing. But sometimes we have to wait for that thing to all the way land, and you can see the nose is a little high there because it hasn't actually landed. So let's wait for it to land, and there we go. And now we can access those starport services. Let's move on to the next clip, and here we'll find ourselves on the planet's surface. I will not be covering how to land on planet surfaces in this guide, and simply lower your gear to do that. But where are we? We're actually on top of our Anaconda. And yes, the SRV is parked on there pretty nicely. You can see its rear lights red on the top of the surface of that thing, and if I pan around using the debug mode, we can see that we are now floating somewhere on top of our biggest contraption machine. You can see the shadows are flickering, and that's perhaps because I'm using low settings to generate the planets, and then we don't get no stuttering, because we have had stuttering already in this review due to my frame ripper and the lowly quantities of my computer. But as you can see, we can land not only on planets but on our spacecraft as well, and we can take a tour of that thing remotely using the spy drone, otherwise known as the debug camera. So that's enough debugging. Let's get back to our scarab it is, and we only have one scarab on this Anaconda because, well, we really don't need any more at this point. And we can take a tour of the top of that thing, inspect that for damage. Of course, we don't really get to see much damage at this point because our Anaconda is in full spec and full working order, but normally the computer will prevent us from trying to climb aboard the top of our ship by deactivating a certain vertical boost option which is required to get us there in the first place. So now we are on top of our Anaconda with a great view. Let's take a dive off the top of that thing, and well, for that let's take a running jump from the back, and sometimes we can go all the way back there, being careful not to fall off, of course. This reveals some of this icy rocky surface, and these hoth-like cliffs looming up there. We'll certainly need to boost over those, but for now let's just make up our own fun while we are here. Far enough away from our spaceship we can activate the vertical boost, and when we are a few hundred meters from crashing down I'd certainly recommend activating that, and then all you need to do is make a soft landing, and we'll be making use of the vertical boost a little later on. But for now, trying to get back to our ship using the normal control method is pretty difficult sometimes because these little ramps can be huge cliffs where we really need to get up there. And yes, I am actually trying to get back to our ship so I can drop off some cargo. Unfortunately, you really have to be below that pickup point, which on the Anaconda is right at the front of that thing. And if you are in a trough or hanging over a cliff at this point, it's nigh on impossible to line it up, and you have to be looking down and using the forward and reverse keys to try and angle yourself in the perfect position. And I've been known to be ready on the trigger so that pops up in the last possible second. It is possible to grab that thing and climb aboard. But look at that, we've actually reversed miles away from the entrance, and so let's line ourselves up again because our ship is quite high. It's quite difficult to do that, and once again be ready on that trigger finger to grab that thing, or at least on the handbrake so that we can stop. And you can see the handbrake light is going on and off as I try to stop, inching forward. And there we go. Let's stop on this spot. Let's dump our cargo, in this case one canister of gold, which if you find any canisters on the planet surface, they will be free to cash in at any stations, which is great. It means there is no bounty on those. And sometimes I've been known to get messages by collecting a few gold on the planet surface, and those messages have taken me halfway across the galaxy to get a few 100,000 credits reward for bringing those back to where they started from originally. And you'll always find gold. Sometimes you'll find all kinds of items like coffee, which are pretty useless. We won't be covering those either in this video, but those are guided usually by remote drones, and it's pretty easy to get rid of those. You'll need to use the activation key to go into turret mode and press your target key to target those and simply gun those away for a free 1,000 credits bonus. So it's worth finding a few of those surface skimmers and blowing those up. But for the moment, let's try to find our stock of gold, which is somewhere left behind here. And yes, it is possible to climb aboard our ship and fly a lot nearer, but I find, well, sometimes it's very hard to find those after you've dumped those and left those behind, and you could be flying around in your ship for ages trying to find it. So at the moment you can see I'm stuck on top of something, and I've landed on my rear end, which means I cannot right myself, and I'm stuck facing the sky. You can see with the debug camera it shows us perched on top of a mountain, and the only thing we can do about that is to use the vertical thrust key yet again and use the mouse to right ourselves. You can see the arrow, which is the paper plane that's floating off because we're not using the mouse at the moment. I'm using my A and D as the driving keys and the plus and the minus on the keypad as my accelerator and decelerator, and that's in continuous mode, but my vertical thrust is set to toggle mode, which is the tab key, and I've set that so that the vertical thrust will automatically stay on until I switch that off. Now we've managed to find a target. We can target that yet again with the T key and use our normal fire button to blow that up. We can also press the T key to investigate the chunks which fly off that thing, and because this planet has a relatively low atmosphere, those chunks will fly up and we'll have to pan around and try to discover those, or we can actually use the left hand panel and check out the contacts in the area. But I find it's more fun to do it this way, and yes, we can actually boost up, use the vertical boost yet again to try and catch those in mid-air, making sure of course that our cargo hatch is open. But if you can't find fun doing that, then the easiest thing to do is to vacuum those things up like a vacuum cleaner and reverse and go over those at any speed you like, even top speed, and you will collect those absolutely no problem. You may notice that I'm not too bothered about what I accumulate in this guide, because I like to sort those out before I leave the planet, and usually it's a lot quicker to just vacuum everything rather than select things and go through things and try to decide. So at the moment I'm still trying to track down those gold canisters, so let's again use that vertical boost option, and on planets like this definitely the flying option is the fast way around the surface. That will probably not accumulate extra kilometers in your statistics bar on the right, but that will definitely get you to the target quicker. And look at that, sometimes you can be lucky and unlucky in this game, and as you'll be able to see in this play guide, I'm really not taking it very easy as I throw myself around. I move at top speed for a number of reasons. One of those is get to where I'm going quicker. The second reason is I can use the speed as a launch pad to launch myself into the air, and air travel is my preferred method. And the third reason is, well, I'm not too bothered about the damage, because the damage can be repaired in a number of ways, and I've collected enough minerals to recharge my damage 16 times over. So I really don't need to bother about my damage. I have those refills to waste, so let's waste those, even if it means taking a few nose dives into the scenery. And again, it's best to save the boost for the last few hundred meters, switch that off early and then put that on to give yourself a nice soft landing. And if you are moving pretty slowly, that will give you a nice slow arc, and if you're moving quickly, that will give you a big arc. And look at this, we've managed to find the carcasses of those skimmers that I blew up earlier on, and that means I can target the gold. Unfortunately, in these scarabs we can only collect 2 gold at any one time, and so once you've collected the second one, then your cargo bay will be full. That means that we need to find the ship again, and the very first thing I like to do upon landing is to move down to the options, and no, we can't unfortunately boot those canisters in front of us all the way. That would be a great feature, particularly on an airless moon like this. But what I like to do usually is dismiss the ship straight away, and then that doesn't cause any problems with the radar, because that can fool the radar and you can be chasing the signals from your own ship, and I've certainly done that. So dismissing the ship straight away is great. You can always recall that at any point, and in the meantime that serves as a marker. And look at that, racing again through that landscape means we're taking a dive, and that's fine. It means we can right ourselves. You can see me using the mouse to right ourselves just like that, and using that boost is necessary in these conditions because these lands are pretty extensive and expansive, and I have been known to get myself blocked inside craters and in walls that I simply cannot boost out of, and it's taken me hours and hours and hours to get there. But you can see flying around the surface is pretty easy as long as you have full power going to the engines and the vertical boost setting set to toggle, so we can have that on at the press of a button. It means that sometimes we can land on top of our ship, and sometimes that is entirely possible, but let's try to aim away from that ship this time and dump that gold. And you can see I completely ignore my hull warning integrities because, well, of course I'm not bothered about wasting those 16 top-ups, so that hull can be repaired all the way to the top. But I'll also be showing you for another reason, and yes, let's try to get over these very small ledges to get up to our ship, and because we cannot get over these small ledges the easy way, what I'm actually going to do, rather than jump those over a small ledge, I'm actually going the long way. Yes, I'm going all the way around the back of that ship, and I'm going to try to boost onto the same level as our ship so that I can get through to that docking area. That's not particularly easy, but if you go a long way like this, it's incredible that a very small ledge can make us go to all this trouble and having to go the long way. But finally, having lined ourselves up, all we need to do is to boost in there, and eventually, well, we really don't want to land on that thing, but if we boost all the way over it, then hopefully we can land on the ledge at the other side. Go through the same process all over again, and we don't have to be aligned with this thing horizontally, we can be aligned with that vertically as well. But let's transfer our goods across, and let's also board the ship at this point. Now that we've boarded the ship, let's select to deploy yet again, and that will drop us back on that planet's surface. And the only difference this time is that we now have 100% hull repaired, and we still have the same fuel, but that means that that 25% damage is now wiped clean. You can see we have 3 different types of floodlights on this vehicle. I can choose by pressing the usual lights key, which is L on my keyboard, which is great. But yes, this thing can really take a battering, and there really is no point hanging around, basically because it creates more of a thrill ride, jetting around these things at high speed, and even if you appear to cock it up, you can still angle that thing backwards and get on a ledge even higher than the one that you were intending to get on. So this game really is fun at high speed. Crawling around these landscapes is certainly not fun best of times, and just like that, you really need to get some speed together to get on to those high ledges. So let's ignore once again that hull damage, and let's jet off towards the nearest big signal. And I have no idea whether that big signal is in fact the canisters at this point or another meteor, but you can see I'm heading in the right direction, and definitely away from our ship, which is in the other direction, and towards those canisters. The only time that we have to move slowly is when we're over the right area, and there again you'll need to watch the radar. As soon as you see a white dot on that radar, then you need to slow down, and it's certainly hard to see that if you're flying at high speed above that. And it's also important to watch the signal strength. If you find a very tight signal strength for a small one, that might contain just a local meteor, but if you find something that's interstellar, then that should create a big signal strength from a long way away. And so you'll need to watch those bands, and again, taking nosedives is no problem in this thing, and it certainly doesn't dent our way towards that, because we make that speed up. Even if we crash and take another skydive, we can still make up that speed as soon as we land and put that thing back into high gear. So this is where the thrill ride comes in. You make up your own fun in these games, otherwise it is boring and a complete waste of time. And so there is nothing crashing landing like asteroids and meteors at this point, which will probably come in further expansions. But there are craters, and you can see very nicely drawn craters with snow on those. And you can't mine snow for fuel, even though that contains hydrogen and oxygen, one of the most combustible of the gases in the universe. So, well, finally we are tracking down that big signal, and we found a small signal as well, and I like to tap away at that, and it doesn't seem to destroy anything along that way. And what do we need from this lot? Well, we've managed to find a couple, and once again we can try to boost our way up there and collect those on the fly if we really want to do that. And so let's try to boost up and collect this one, and well, unfortunately not. Unless you are right over the top of that, you won't collect that in midair, but circus tricks are involved. But let's drive over there because we have found one mineral that we need, and let's this time remember to open the cargo hatch, which can be left open at all times, and that won't create drag when flying either. So the very second thing I do after I've dismissed my ship is to open the cargo hatch before I even press the accelerator, and that's usually what I do anyway, which saves time. So, well, now we've found a few big signals. Sometimes those clusters fall in relatively the same area, and you have to pull back on those, so the targeting system will find those. If you are too close, then that won't get them. And the usual candidates in these rocks are iron, phosphorus, nickel, and maybe some carbon as well. But I will give you this tip for free: I do not collect carbon. I reject 100% of all carbon before I leave the planet's surface, because the carbon in this game really only repairs 2 weapons currently, and if you don't have those 2 weapons, then there's no point collecting those, and those are just basic upgrades anyway. So I reject carbon on sight. But if you collect iron, and I think it's phosphorus together, then you will gain another hull repair if you get down to maybe 10% damage, and you can't bring that thing back close to the ship and get a free hull repair, and carry on just as before. But you can see in the contacts I can check out what I have in that local area, and that's how you do planet surfaces. And yet again, when leaving the planet's surface, no matter how bad it is, it's always best to try to find a system which is close, which is on the horizon. You can see this system is particularly on the horizon for this one, so let's try to boost out of there as quickly as possible, and let's try to get to that destination once again without using the super cruise and going the slow way out of the atmosphere. And so let's use the vertical thrust in this case, and then use the boost a couple of times so that we can get rid of the mass lock, which disappears momentarily. And you can use exactly this system, as we shall see later, in interdiction sequences and other normal space flight modes. If you're in normal space cruise, then you can use this key, which in my case is the B key, to toggle the hyperspace, and that will go into this mode, and that will basically skip out all that time that you would have wasted. As usual, exiting the hyperspace can lead to some very deadly stars, so if you're faced with something that looks black, the best thing to do is to hit the 0% key straight away and angle your way around there until you see stars. As soon as you see those stars, then that's probably the best way out of there, otherwise it's a death trap. And of course in this system it's usually pretty boring with nothing much in there as soon as you see any collapsed stars, but there are exceptions, of course, as there are exceptions to every rule. And you may also notice that I'm not actually bothering to refuel either, because fuel aboard these ships, well, that creates tonnage, and that detriments our light range, and so I like to run my ship below halfway if possible, and then that gives us maybe another 4 or 5 extra light range on top of what we normally have. And so, well, here we go. I have the fuel scoop, but we have a 32-ton tank on the Anaconda, and we can even buy an extra 32-ton tank if we should wish, and that should get us with 64 tons very much through that universe, definitely from the middle to the bottom of it. And at the moment I'm floating around Federation space pretty much near Sol, and because we are heading that way, let's bring a few pro cells back to Sol from my favourite place, and that will only give us 1,000 free credits per ton. And at the moment I have had actually 3,100 credits per ton by taking advantage of a trade route which ends at Bell Terminal, which is around Achenar. So if you can take Imperial slaves and find the cheapest place to Bell Terminal, that's 1,300 credits per ton, but I don't like to milk those for too long because it actually gets boring. So I'm actually floating around the universe being a mercenary, picking up jobs here and there. Now that I have that Anaconda, I'm really not bothered about getting the next bigger ships, I'm actually getting to learn this one, and the next ship that I will buy after this is probably going to be the 3rd Lance, and then I can get back into those war zones and increase my combat rank. But for the moment, I'm actually showing you another time-saving tip. If you fly off at a 45-degree angle from where you want to go, it certainly gives you a head start because it gives you all that light range space. It certainly gives you that speed as well. You can see that the speed we are approaching is pretty darn quick, but as soon as that thing appears on our screen, then the speed or light range speed will go down, and so it's best to keep that thing off the screen for as long as possible. I remember in 1.3 it was possible to really have that thing going over 80 and maybe over 100 light years per second or whatever that speed is, but in this game unfortunately they've slightly tweaked that, and now in Horizons if the destination is on screen at any point, then your frameshift drive will automatically start to slow down. But definitely aim away from whatever it is you're aiming for, and that gets you up to speed. But in this game they've also tweaked the landing computer, and for big craft like this unfortunately it is a little broken, but what I like to do is activate that from a distance, and then the ship hopefully will boost in, and similar to how we would have boosted in had we selected that a lot closer. And because it is broken, sometimes it will go in 360 degrees even if you've lined that thing up perfectly for the exit. So what I like to do until they fix that is to activate the docking computer from quite some way away, and then it will sort itself out and not usually spin wildly around in circles like it's dancing to this music. And whilst we enjoy the Viennese waltz, we aim that thing in, and it always likes to aim moving left and right for some reason rather than up or down. And so now finally it is angled as in there, and we are in. Really it is not getting in the station which is the problem, it is seeing the landing bays due to this giant nose, and I have no problems getting into stations, but I certainly have problems seeing those landing bays. Similarly with a large station like this, it's best to secure that landing permission, but we have to be within 7 kilometers of that, otherwise we are too far away. And then as soon as we are on that, even if we are around the corner, I like to slam the docking computer on, and then it can boost its way all the way there, just like we would have done it, and it will save time hopefully messing around. But that is certainly not foolproof. You can see the angle that we are approaching right now is certainly not foolproof, and if this docking computer isn't careful it will crash off and veer off, and if you attempt to alter the path using your keys or even the boost keys whilst the docking computer is landing, unfortunately it will disconnect and plough you straight into the cage or the station. And I've had that happen to me, so it's best to leave everything alone, go and grab something out of the fridge and go and drink something, and then when you come back eventually you'll find that your ship has landed. So let's speed up that landing process, land, and now we are in Mikhail Gorbachev station. Let's dump off those pro cells that we got, a full tonnage of those, and let's see what else there is in these bulletin boards. And unfortunately the bulletin boards have changed from how they used to be. There are no free easy missions anymore, and free easy ways to rank up that rank. There is very little in the way of donations going on, and you really have to be picking up those loose ends in order to get anywhere as far as ranks go. And as you can see, this one is simply to deliver a package to a station, and that's easy enough. We've managed to land already, so let's secure that. Even though it's not much money, it still means that it's an easy job and it's an easy rank increase, and it's always possible to check out those stats and to boost our allied stats, particularly in our home base of Sol, which, well, that used to be our home base, but these days it floats around. The last home base I had was actually Shinra to Desra, but for the moment I don't have a base, I'm simply floating around. So let's take off and let's show you how it is possible to get through this grill without incurring any damage whatsoever. This is my normal method of leaving the station. Simply press the 5 key on the keypad and that activates my 50% thrust. which is the one I use to activate that, and simply align the dot on the horizon above the halfway point. And as long as you do that, I can put it onto full speed now, and I can also press the boost key now and get ourselves out of that station. And looking at the radar, you can see there are no craft in our way. You can see the white mark on the horizon is simply an exit point where somebody jumped into hyperspace, so we can now boost into that clear area. That is actually Earth, you can see, which is rather oddly shaped. I can't really make out the continents there, but that was Earth. And now let's land on this planet and let's get that reward. And yet again, as soon as we jump into that system and lock that target, it's best to have that away as far as possible from our current route, and sometimes it's even best to target empty space if that's possible. And in 1.3, 1.4 I've had this travelling at over 100 light years per second, but unfortunately as soon as you angle that thing, if you're not absolutely careful, you'll start to reduce speed. And I'm actually playing this on a 4:3 monitor, which gives me extra height, and I've compromised and made this picture smaller so I can stretch that out into 16:9 for YouTube. So I actually could see that placed there on the top of my screen with my extra height. And so, well, that's what I usually like to do to keep that light speed as fast as possible. And we'll be going through a few time saving tips later on, how to save time scanning planets in virtually half the time as it would do normally. But for the moment, let's angle that thing in there and let's speed this up. Unfortunately, you can see that I've managed to trigger the slowdown, and that thing will very much slow down now that we are in horizons, so it is difficult to keep on going at anywhere near the top speed that we used to be able to get simply by angling away from our target. But it is still possible as long as you go very slowly and you can fool that computer. But now let's just lock on to our target. We can find that because it's been discovered in this system, and because it's been discovered, all the surface items will be lit. If you can see a dotted line, that means it's behind the planet, and when we get anywhere near that planet, you press the 5 key around here, and that means, well, my 5 key anyway, it slows me down to 50% rate. And when we angle that thing, it's best to do that upside down, and when it appears with a few centimeters above that screen off the planet's edge, then you can start to aim for that. And if you want to, you can actually speed it up at this point up to 75% thrust, but let's just slow this down to normal speed. And yes, we can be interdicted at this point, and I have been interdicted whilst trying to land. But if all goes well, you can see that the panel on the right centre of the hood will drop down, and if it goes through some of those barriers, it will drop down into the glide. And once you're in glide, again, aim above where you need to aim for, and that should hopefully, everything considered, that will overshoot and that will get you down nearer. And even though it's pretty scary sometimes falling through the atmosphere, you can abandon the glide at any point by pressing the 25% thrust key, and for me that's number 2 on the keypad. So unfortunately this time I didn't angle that amazingly correctly, and that's left us quite some distance away, and we can boost towards that, of course. So let's just speed up and boost towards that, and of course when we are anywhere near that station we can select the docking permission and then press the key to land. So again, I'm speeding this up, and landing on the planet's surface isn't hard. And in here we'll find the bulletin board mission. We can drop that off and get the cash, and you can see rough stats as well. But planetary landings aren't always that perfect, particularly if you find a system that hasn't been explored, because if it's planetary based, then you'll need the advanced surface scanner, or the detailed surface scanner, whatever it's called, and you'll still need that when you investigate these planets. And if you don't have that, and you don't scan that with the detailed surface scanner, unfortunately, those surface bases won't appear on the surface of the planet. So even though you have a base and you've scanned that planet, the bases will not appear unless you have that. And at this point I had no idea that that would be an issue, so I'm actually selecting that mission and I'm actually setting off towards a planet surface with a base on it, intent to create a video about that and how to scan bases and get those unlock missions. I have taken on a mission before now, which is basically an unlock mission where you have to open the gate to the base by activating the turret mode and then pressing your scan key to scan the white turrets around the base. That deactivates all the phasers and the blasters around that thing, and then if you scan the red turrets around the planet surface, then that will interface with the main computer, and that means for the unlock the gate missions, that's mission complete. So as you see, this planet is disappearing as we go into hyperspace the quick way from planet surface. Let's head towards that planet surface and let's see how difficult that would be. And if you are in headlock mode when you exit the planet and you go into hyperspace, then you can look around during that point, which is another novelty, but you have to be very quick, otherwise you'll plough straight into the sun. So you have to press the middle mouse button to activate that. And so let's head off and let's scan this area, because the entire system hasn't been scanned. Then we'll have a difficult time, because that means that there are no detailed surface available in the system map. So let's press that system map, let's check that out. Well, there's only one planet in this entire system, so it has to be on the surface of that, and we can target that planet no problem, but unfortunately there are no bases that we can see listed on that, and well, that's because we don't have the surface scanner. Let's head towards that yet again, angling that thing away from our target and looking at the small map on the left hand side with the main radar to line that thing up. And yet again, when we are pretty close to that thing, we can scan that region, because this region is unexplored. It might be worth exploring, so let's get towards that and let's start scanning it, and let's see if that reveals any of the information that we need. See, the surface bases are all listed as unexplored, and we'll have to fly down and investigate those individually if we want to complete this mission. And the only other two places available are the two starports floating around orbiting the main star, which is not where I wanted to go. It's certainly a planet-side base, so that saves time if you have the detailed surface scanner. And well, basically I couldn't bothered to scan the whole system and the planet surface as well, but ordinarily if you have that discovered, all you have to do is to zoom in on the planet, on the planetary galaxy map there, and that will automatically go into surface mode. You can see I'm trying to zoom in, that isn't working, so the detailed surface scanner certainly pays for itself in taking on these types of missions, which that detailed surface scanner really didn't have much point before. So let's move on from this icy world onto another situation and onto another time-saving trip, and this time we find ourselves actually with a guy that has run out of fuel. Unfortunately we don't have any fuel refill pods, but you can see he's crying out for some fuel, and we can inject 1 ton of fuel into that craft if we had some fuel control limpets or whatever they're called, and that will require us to get to a starbase. So let's fly off to the next destination and let's retract our weapons, because we thought that guy could have been a bounty hunter or a pirate trying to lure us in to a distress call, but distress calls are in Horizons and that's what you'll get. And because we're in normal flight mode at the moment, I'm yet again choosing to toggle the hyperspace, and that function means that even though we are in normal flight mode at the moment, we don't have to go back into super cruise and then go on to the next planets, the next systems. No, we can simply go on to the next system from normal flight, and that's how you do it. And you emerge. So let's get to the next base, and yet again, as soon as I get anywhere near the 7-kilometer mark, I like to ask security for docking permission, and once I've got that docking permission, all I need to do is to activate the docking computer. And as I say, I wouldn't really recommend the docking computer on any of the craft, but you can see on the Anaconda it boosts us in, and see if it's doing all that boosting, and it usually lines itself up a lot better if you select that thing from outside the area and let it boost itself in, rather than try to align yourself with the cage manually and try to outthink it. And that means you can get some pretty spectacular views of that megastructure as we come into land. But apart from that, the docking computer is slightly dodgy in this version, and even though we are trying to come into land, you can see it's making a meal of itself, and well, that's necessary when you have the Anaconda, but otherwise it's not worth the money, it's not money well spent. So let's get ourselves into that station, and let's actually fast forward that footage all the way in and get us landed into that spot. And yes, great views, but we cannot actually see, unfortunately, the docking bay because of our monstrous hulk. So let's just land and let's check out, first of all, the bulletin board, just in case there are any charity missions floating around, and they are very much cut down in this release, so we won't find many charity missions. Whilst we're here, let's just dip into the station itself and check out our upgrades and see if we can upgrade to a fuel limpet controller. And as you can see, there is not much, unfortunately, on the bulletin board, and so this is my current loadout. My ship, you'll find dual beam lasers and multi-cannons and maybe some shield boosters to prop those up, and I have actually got this thing rigged to D spec, mostly because that gives me a decent frame shift rate, 27 light years, and you can see that there isn't much room in here for a detailed surface scanner or any fuel control limpets. And so I am not going to give up any cargo space because I think I'm already on a premium 360 odd cargo space. Well, we really don't need to sacrifice any more than that, but as you can see, if we list those in alphabetical order, there is nothing under F for fuel, and there is actually nothing listed for fuel control limpets. So unfortunately this base does not have those. Not that it would be possible to find that downed pilot and to find that signal source again, flying out all the way to that spot, having picked up some fuel in the first place. So you really have to have that on tap, or there's really no point checking out those distress calls, and so that's why you need the fuel control limpets. You'll find those in stations with high tech. Certainly you'll find those in Shinra Desra Founders World at Jabison Orbital, but you will not find those just when you wanted those to help that pilot, and that's seriously lacking in this game. But apart from that, let's move on to our final scenario, and as promised, it's the scanning of stars and scanning of bodies, and so we've found a very collapsed star here. Maybe that's a neutron star or a white dwarf, but we've found actually something which is scannable in the distance, and that thing is a sun, it's a star, and so everything collected and scanned at this point won't have the detailed surface scan bonus, because I'm not going to sacrifice any more room in this Anaconda. But what we do have is the normal scanner, and that will scan, and that reveals a number of planets. At this point, having revealed those, it's best to check those out, and yes, we can see that those planets are actually valuable and worth scanning. So let's aim for the first one of those and show you the quick way how to scan those. And of course the quickest way is to aim away from that target, whatever it is, but in this case I'm actually aiming towards that, and I'm actually choosing to fly above the target. Sometimes you can scan the whole system simply flying above the whole system, coming down directly on top of that star, and if those astral bodies are within 10 of the main star, maybe 10 kilometers, then you'll be able to scan all those in one go. But these astral bodies are pretty spread out, so what I am going to show you is the quick way to scan things which are spread out, and that is to aim towards those. Again, press the 75% thrust key when you get anywhere near, 7 seconds to go, and as soon as that thing is close enough, less than 100 light seconds, or even closer than that sometimes, then you can press the 25% key to slow down. So keep an eye on that scanner. As soon as it starts scanning, you have to press that 25% key, and it's quick on the draw sometimes, because as soon as you press that, then that means that you've saved time getting to the next one. And if you forget and leave that alone, then you'll fly too close to those astral bodies, and unfortunately you've wasted time trying to do that. So here we are scanning. We have slowed down to 25% thrust, and as soon as this thing has finished scanning, we can move out of the area, move out of its way, and then press the 75% key. Keep an eye on the speed. We are trying to keep that thing above light speed as much as possible, and because we are only 25% thrust, we are taking our time to get to that planet, and therefore we won't slow down as much. So let's select the next target, hit the 75% key, otherwise that thing will go crazy and force us to slow down again. And then when we are above the speed where we want to go, many light years per second, and that thing starts scanning just like this, then we can press the 25% key and slow down to 25% thrust all over again. If we hesitate and don't press the 75% key, then you can see we slow right down, and if we do slow right down for any reason, then the best thing to do is to aim straight for that star again and get us above light speed. Aiming for the star should hopefully pull us into that gravity, and we can slingshot around the star and head towards our next target. And that's precisely what I'm doing at the moment, above light speed, and it forces us to slow down, but I'm slowing down anyway because we are starting the scan. As that happens, it's best to select the next target. We can leave that thing scanning alone, and we can see in the status panel when that's finished. So let's line up that next target, ready and waiting, and then we can activate that straight away, just like that. So you can see by alternating between 25% and 75%, we can scan all these bodies, and even if they are small bodies, it doesn't really make a difference. If they are large bodies, then we can find that we are back up to 40 times the speed of light in seconds, simply by moving down to 25%, even if that body is 2,000 light seconds away when it starts to scan. It just means that we can speed up all the quicker. And yes, we can use the headlock mode and select our new target using that method, and we can look around at the same time. So thank you for watching this video. I hope it's given you a few tips as to how to play Elite Dangerous Horizons.